Money can't buy love, but it can blind you to what truly matters. I thought I had everything: wealth, status, power. But one encounter with a woman who saw right through me changed everything. This is the story of how I learned what real love really means. Listen closely. This isn't just another story about wealth. This is about the moment you realize love can't be bought, negotiated, or manipulated. Are you ready to discover what real connection truly means? Money was never just money to me. It was a weapon, a shield, a way to keep the world at arm's length. I grew up in a family where success was measured in dollars, connections, and the kind of power that makes people step aside when you walk into a room. My father built an empire from nothing: real estate, tech investments, political connections. By the time I was 25, I had more money than most people see in 10 lifetimes. But here's the thing about growing up with wealth. You learn quickly that everything has a price tag: relationships, transactional, friendships, networking opportunities, love. Just another commodity to be purchased, managed, controlled. I'd watch my father negotiate million-dollar deals with the same emotional detachment he used when buying a new car or choosing a vacation home. And I became exactly like him. My dating life was a perfect reflection of this worldview. Beautiful women, expensive restaurants, gifts that could make most people's eyes water. I thought I was providing everything anyone could want. A penthouse overlooking the city, designer clothes, vacations on private islands. I'd sweep women off their feet with displays of wealth that seemed like love. A Ferrari for your birthday, a spontaneous trip to Paris, a diamond necklace just because. But deep down, I knew these were just elaborate distractions, payments to avoid real intimacy. I surrounded myself with people who never challenged me, who saw the dollar signs before they saw me. My circle was a carefully curated collection of yes men, social climbers, and those who benefited from my success. Vulnerability was a weakness. Emotion was a liability. I had mastered the art of looking successful while feeling completely empty inside. Success was my addiction, money was my drug, and connection. That was something I'd long ago decided was unnecessary. My relationships were strategic. Each woman was a careful selection, beautiful, ambitious, someone who would look perfect in photos and at corporate events. But true connection, genuine understanding, those were luxuries I told myself I couldn't afford. I was building an empire after all. Who had time for real feelings? Little did I know, everything was about to change. One encounter would shatter every carefully constructed wall, every carefully maintained illusion. And it would come from the most unexpected place. A woman who saw right through my bullshit, who understood that real wealth wasn't something you could count in a bank statement. But that's getting ahead of the story. To understand how everything changed, you need to know who I was before. A man who thought money could buy anything, except the one thing he didn't know he was missing. It was a Thursday. Not just any Thursday, but the kind of day that starts ordinary and ends up changing everything. I was at a charity gala, another networking event where wealthy people congratulate themselves on their philanthropy while barely understanding the real issues. These events were my playground, a stage where I could showcase my success, my carefully crafted image. She stood out immediately, not because she was dressed in the most expensive gown or dripping with jewelry, but because she wasn't trying to be anything other than herself. While everyone else performed their social dance, she seemed genuinely engaged with the community leaders, listening with an intensity that was rare in my world. Her name was Amara, and she carried herself with a confidence that didn't come from money, but from something far more powerful. Our first conversation was nothing like my usual interactions. I approached her with my standard charm. The smile that had opened more doors than I could count, the subtle name drop, the casual mention of my latest business venture. But Amara wasn't impressed. She looked at me, really looked at me, in a way no one had before. It wasn't a look of attraction or calculation. It was a look of pure, unfiltered assessment. "You're good at talking," she said, "but I'm curious if you're good at listening." The words caught me off guard. In my world, conversations were typically one-sided. Me talking, others nodding, agreeing, hoping to gain something. But Amara, she challenged me from the moment we met. She spoke about community development, about real change, about the difference between charity as a tax write-off and genuine human connection. Our first conversation was nothing like my usual interactions. I approached her with my standard charm, the smile that had opened more doors than I could count, the subtle name drop, the casual mention of my latest business venture. But Amara wasn't impressed. She looked at me, really looked at me, in a way no one had before. It wasn't a look of attraction or calculation. It was a look of pure, unfiltered assessment. "You're good at talking," she said, "but I'm curious if you're good at listening." The words caught me off guard. In my world, conversations were typically one-sided, me talking, others nodding, agreeing, hoping to gain something. But Amara, she challenged me from the moment we met. She spoke about community development, about real change, about the difference between charity as a tax write-off and genuine human connection. I found myself doing something I rarely did, actually listening. She wasn't impressed by my wealth, didn't care about my status. She saw through the carefully constructed facade I'd spent years building. Where others saw a successful businessman, she saw a man hiding behind his money, using wealth as a shield against genuine human experience. Our conversation was a collision of worlds, my carefully managed universe of transactions and surface-level interactions crashed against her world of authentic connection and meaningful purpose. She spoke about her work with local communities, about empowerment, about building real solutions, instead of just throwing money at problems. I was used to winning every conversation, to having the last word, to controlling every interaction. But with Amara, I found myself off balance. She didn't argue with me, she challenged me to think differently. Each word was like a precise instrument, cutting through the layers of my carefully constructed self. By the end of the night, I was unsettled, not because she was trying to impress me, but because she wasn't trying to impress me at all. She was simply being herself, completely, unapologetically authentic, and that was something money could never buy. I didn't know it then, but that night was the beginning of everything changing. Amara was about to become the mirror I'd been avoiding my entire life, the reflection that would force me to see myself truly, for the first time. The weeks after our first meeting became a persistent itch I couldn't scratch. Amara wasn't like anyone I'd ever met. She didn't follow up with a request for funding, didn't try to secure a business connection, didn't play any of the games I was used to. Instead, she sent me a book, not an expensive first edition or a signed collector's item, but a well-worn copy of a community development text with handwritten notes in the margins. I found myself doing something completely out of character. I read it, not skimmed, not had my assistant provide a summary, but actually read every single page. Her margin notes were revelations, critical observations, personal reflections, challenges to conventional thinking that made my carefully constructed worldview feel like a house of cards. Our conversations became a battlefield of perspectives. She didn't attack my wealth directly. Instead, she dismantled my beliefs with a precision that was both infuriating and intoxicating. Money is a tool, she'd say, not a personality, not a substitute for human connection. Each conversation peeled back another layer of my defensive armor. I started to see my life for what it really was, an elaborate performance. The expensive suits, the corporate lunches, the charity galas, they were all carefully choreographed scenes in a play where I was both the star and the biggest lie. Amara showed me that I'd been running from something far deeper than failure. I'd been running from myself. One evening, Over coffee that cost less than my usual valet tip, she asked me a question that stopped me cold. What's the last thing you did that wasn't about impressing someone or making money? The silence was deafening. I couldn't remember. Years of my life had become a series of transactions, achievements measured in dollars, and social media likes. My world began to crack. The networks I'd built, the relationships I'd maintained, they were all transactional. Friends who would disappear the moment my bank account showed weakness. Family connections that were more about maintaining a brand than genuine love. I was rich beyond most people's imagination, and yet I was profoundly, achingly poor. Amara didn't coddle me through this revelation. She wasn't a therapist or a savior. She was a mirror, reflecting back the parts of myself I'd spent years avoiding. Each conversation was a surgical strike against my ego, dismantling the protective walls I'd built brick by brick. I started to see the true cost of my lifestyle. The missed family dinners, the relationships I'd bought instead of earned, the genuine connections I'd avoided out of fear of vulnerability. My wealth wasn't a blessing, it had become a prison, and I was both the inmate and the guard. For the first time in my life, I felt truly naked. No amount of money could hide me from myself anymore. Amara had done what no one else had ever managed. She'd made me see the difference between being successful and being alive. The confrontation wasn't about making me feel guilty. It was about waking me up. And for the first time, I was terrified and excited about what I might discover. The universe has a way of testing you exactly when you think you've got everything figured out. My moment of reckoning came unexpectedly, a perfect storm of everything I'd been learning from Amara and the life I'd built. My family's company was in the middle of a critical acquisition, a deal that would expand our real estate empire into a new market. It was the kind of opportunity my father had been grooming me for my entire life. Millions were at stake, careers would be made or destroyed, and our family's legacy hung in the balance. Traditionally, this would have been my moment of triumph. But something had changed. The deal involved displacing a community, a neighborhood of working-class families, many of them Black and Latino, who had lived in those buildings for generations. Old documents, legal technicalities, and corporate maneuvering would make the displacement look legal. Technically, we'd be within our rights. Legally, we'd be untouchable. I found myself sitting in the boardroom, surrounded by lawyers and executives who were ready to move forward. These were the same people who had taught me everything I knew about business. Success was about numbers, about expansion, about never showing weakness. My father's voice echoed in my head. Business is business. You can't save everyone. But Amara's voice was louder. I remembered the community center she'd shown me, the kids' programs, the adult education classes, the support networks built over decades. These weren't just buildings. These were homes, lives, entire histories. For the first time in my life, I did something completely unexpected. I walked away from the deal. Not just negotiated, not just modified, completely walked away. The fallout was immediate. My father called, his voice a hurricane of rage and disappointment. "You're throwing away generations of work," he said. "You're being naive." The board members looked at me like I'd lost my mind. My own family, the people who had defined success for me my entire life, were ready to cut me off. Amara didn't celebrate. She didn't congratulate me. Instead, she looked at me with a mix of respect and challenge. "This isn't about being a hero," she said. "This is about understanding that your actions have real consequences. What are you going to do next?" It wasn't about being a savior. It was about seeing the humanity behind the numbers, about understanding that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the lives you impact, about choosing integrity over inheritance. I was walking away from everything I'd been taught, everything I'd believed made me successful, and for the first time, I felt truly free. The real test wasn't just about one deal. It was about who I was going to choose to be. not the person my family wanted, not the person the business world expected, but the person I was finally allowing myself to become. Walking away from everything I'd known wasn't a single moment of triumph. It was a daily battle, a constant process of unlearning and relearning. The world I'd inhabited, the world of instant gratification, of money solving every problem, didn't disappear overnight. I was learning to exist in a way I'd never imagined. Amara didn't become my savior or my girlfriend. She became something far more important, a mirror, a challenge, a true friend. She introduced me to a world where value wasn't measured in bank statements, but in human connections. I started volunteering, not as a photo opportunity, but as a genuine commitment to understanding communities I'd previously only seen as potential investments. My family's initial reaction was brutal. Cut-offs, heated arguments, endless attempts to bring me back to the rational world of business. My mother would call, her voice breaking, asking what had happened to the son she'd raised. My father's silence was more deafening than any argument. I was becoming a stranger to the people who had defined my entire existence. But for the first time, I was learning to define myself. I started small, listening more than speaking, learning instead of assuming. The community center Amara had shown me became a second home. I wasn't there to save anyone or to look good. I was there to understand, to learn, to connect. I tutored kids, helped with job training programs, listened to stories I'd never heard before. Money was still a part of my life, but it was no longer my entire identity. I began redirecting my resources, not through grand gestures, but through meaningful investments in people. Scholarship funds, small business grants, support for local initiatives that actually made a difference. The transformation wasn't linear. There were days of doubt, moments when the old me would resurface, the guy who wanted to solve everything with a check, who saw people as opportunities. But those moments became fewer. I was learning the most expensive lesson of my life. True wealth is something you can't purchase. Amara watched this journey with a mixture of skepticism and quiet support. She never let me off the hook, never celebrated me for doing what should have been basic human decency. "This isn't about being a good person," she'd say. "This is about being a real person." I lost friends, the kind of friends who were only around when I was throwing money around. I gained something far more valuable, genuine connections, people who saw me, not my wallet. Relationships built on understanding, not transactions. My definition of success completely transformed. It was no longer about how much I could accumulate, but how much I could contribute. How many lives I could genuinely touch. How much I could learn, grow, and truly connect. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had to lose everything to understand what I truly had. The wealth I'd been so proud of was nothing compared to the richness of genuine human connection. And Amara, this incredible black woman who refused to let me hide behind my money, she had been the catalyst for everything. I wasn't perfect. I was just finally becoming real. People think transformation is a dramatic moment, a single decision that changes everything. But real change, it's in the quiet moments, the small choices, the daily commitment to being something more than you were yesterday. 5 years after that first conversation with Amara, I barely recognized the man I used to be. Not because I'd become someone completely different, but because I'd finally become authentic. My relationship with my family slowly healed. Not through grand gestures, but through honest conversations, through showing them a version of success they'd never understood. I didn't end up with Amara romantically. That was never the point. Our connection was far deeper, a friendship forged in mutual respect, in challenging each other's perspectives. She remained my most honest critic, my most valuable friend. The kind of person who would call me out faster than anyone else, but also the first to support me when it truly mattered. The community center, where I'd first learned to truly see people, became more than just a place. It became a testament to what's possible when you choose connection over transaction. I didn't own it, I didn't control it, I was simply a part of it, another thread in a larger tapestry of human experience. My wealth didn't disappear, but it transformed. Instead of being a wall, it became a bridge. Scholarships, small business loans, community development projects, not as a savior, but as a partner. Learning that true power isn't about control, it's about empowerment. The day I truly understood my journey wasn't about a single moment of revelation. It was a gradual awakening, a realization that love, real love, isn't something you can buy, negotiate, or control. It's something you show up for, day after day, with vulnerability, with honesty, with a willingness to be wrong, to learn, to grow. Amara taught me that the most valuable currency isn't money. It's understanding, it's connection, it's seeing the humanity in people beyond their circumstances, beyond their potential value to you. I used to think I was self-made. Now I understand I'm community-made. Every person who challenged me, who saw me, who refused to let me hide behind my wealth, they were the ones who truly built me. My father once told me that life is about winning. Amara showed me that life is about understanding, about connection, about being brave enough to be truly seen. I walked away from his riches, and in doing so, I found something far more valuable, myself. Your wealth means nothing if your heart remains empty. True love isn't about what you can provide financially, but about the soul you bring to a relationship. Are you brave enough to walk away from superficial connections and fight for something real?